YouTube. This is Leah. How are you? I hope you are having a wonderful weekend. My weekend is a little bit. I took a nap for a while, I think, mainly because uh, all the medicine that I'm taking right now is really either makes me, it's not making me lethargic anymore. I've been taking turmeric to stop that. So that kind of helps a little bit. All right, so and I haven't complained of pressure readings problems, but there is anyway. As some of you know, I have glaucoma, so it is not a very good disease to have. You eventually end up going blind, and your sight is very your sight will deteriorate. Short of a miracle, I ask for prayer on all kinds of ends already. So, why did I decide to do this video? Well, I was going to do a different kind of video called A Message for Feminists, but I decided to change it up a little bit and kind of give a little bit of a perspective here and kind of talk about different things that um, if it weren't for the guys in our lives, be very we wouldn't be where we are today. I would dedicate, and I was going to dedicate it to a guy that I was going to dedicate this to a guy, but I think I'm going a friend that I knew from way back who's no longer with us. But I think I'm going to save that for a different and post it on my Christian Rock and Fellowship link instead. And I have the Christian Rock and Fellowship channel. I'm wearing one of the t-shirts of one of my favorite bands that I saw at Cornerstone, so that was awesome. Okay, let's get back to business. This is a message for feminists, and it talks about the tale of two queens. One wicked, one brave. And I will talk about that in just a minute, but I want to ask you ladies a question. How is your relationships with your dads or your husbands? If you had husbands or boyfriends, are you living it up, or are you trying to manipulate it so you never get hurt? If that's the case, you better stop, because you're going to hurt somebody unnecessarily. We've got these cultural things going on, the third wave feminism people keep talking about. I don't like it personally, and I think it does more damage to women than it helps. In fact, it makes them continually victims, and victims often become, as the ugly word entitled comes along. Entitled people do things to manipulate people so they themselves save themselves from embarrassment, or they make themselves greater than they really are. If you want to talk about women's issues, you need to talk about things that are not, things that are real, like women who have come up in the world, women equal, things that are equal, that should be equal, not things that you're trying to manufacture in order to be equal. I mean, the sciences, you complain that there are no women, not very many women in sciences. Could it be that some women are just not interested? Could it be that you're trying to manufacture something that people might find a little bit, shall we say, that's not in their thing? Now, I got interested in astronomy a few times because I like to see stars. But I'm afraid that I won't be able to see them for much longer because I have glaucoma. That's nobody's fault. It just happened. And I would not be able to do some of the stuff. I used to take a lot of pictures. I used to want to take a lot of pictures. And now I'm unable to see what I'm doing. So I want to make sure while I have the sight left to do these things, I will be able to finally get used to the idea of trying to do things as a blind person would. I could stand here as a victim right now and tell the world that everybody's against me and all that stuff. I've heard that many times in my life, and I refuse to listen to it. And I've heard it from several people, very entitled, disabled people, that have done just that. I'm sick of hearing it. I don't want to hear another word. And that's a quote from my late friend who taught me that, at a very strong-willed personality and emotionally nutty personality sometimes. I don't want to hear another word. And that is what we need to kind of get back to that. Now, let's talk about the tale of two queens, shall we? The first queen, very wicked. Her story is found in First Kings, mostly in the 18th and 19th chapters, and I think in the 21st chapter, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, the 21st chapter. Now, but her story actually begins in the 16th chapter, where King Ahab was very wicked. He was in the northern kingdom that was split from the southern kingdom. There was a judgment on Solomon because he had he had lost his first love by marrying, sealing agreements by marrying these foreign women. And these foreign women would bring their gods with them. And so they turned his heart away from God. Now, God's pronounced judgment on him and said that the kingdom would be divided. And so that's exactly what happened. They followed the southern kingdom of Judah followed Rehoboam, and the northern kingdom of Israel followed Jeroboam. Now Jeroboam turned out to be a very wicked king. He ended up putting calf idols in there so that people wouldn't go to Jerusalem, and he made worship of them as if it were the one true God, and so he put high places up there. So there were very few long-standing monarchs in the northern kingdom of Israel. Now, and genealogy speaking, they would either kill each other off, or they would kill each other off literally, and become king in the stead of the other ones. So there was plenty of violence within that whole sector. Now, in all of that, here comes Ahab, the son of Omri. Omri was, defeated a king that only ruled for 7 days, but he turned out to be a very wicked ruler. So his son Ahab, that dynasty didn't last very long. So Ahab was more wicked than his father, and if it was, he brought Baal worship into the kingdom of Israel with his marriage to Jezebel. Now, she was no ordinary queen. She was the daughter of a priest of Baal, Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians. So she had a prominent place, and she was a very spoiled princess and later queen. She did not want to marry Ahab, so she was determined to keep her gods with her and make sure Israel didn't follow the God of Israel. The God, Jehovah, or Yahweh. And used her power and influence to make sure that any prophet of God that was alive should be killed. So here comes Elijah the Tishbite, who was a constant thorn in her side. We all know this story about the contest in Mount Carmel between her prophets that sat at her table, the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 of the groves of the Asherah poles. Um, and they're, in 1 Kings chapter 18, it talks about how they were hooping and hollering all day, and they couldn't get a hold of their God because their God couldn't see, hear, or speak or do anything. And they even cut themselves, and Elijah was mocking them the entire time. And so Elijah ended up, after they couldn't get a hold of their God, so Elijah prayed, Lord, let it be known today that you are the God of Israel and that you are the only one to be worshipped. And boom, fire came down from heaven. Now, we got to remember those details about the trenches of water. The trenches of water, buckets full. Just buckets full. So nobody could say that he cheated. Nobody could say that he cheated. So, and it lapped up the stones, the water, the sacrifice, everything. And so, after that, the prophet had commanded that the false prophets be put to death in the Kidron Valley. Well, that didn't sit well, even though the rain came, all that stuff that was promised, that didn't sit well with Ms. Jezebel. In fact, she was so angry that she sent a message to the prophet saying, I'm going to get you. That's basically what she said. And so he had a big victory, and we talk about his he went through a depression. We know that, and he was of course, God kind of restored him. And we're not talking about Elijah, but we're talking about this queen. She was determined more than ever to get this prophet because he was a constant thorn. Let's fast forward to chapter 21 of 1 Kings, and you see a story about the king pouting because he couldn't get the vineyard that was next to his palace. Naboth, the owner, was the rightful owner because it was in his family for years. And it was his family, and the king wanted it for an herb garden. Well, the king did what he did in kingly fashion. He did something wonderful. He pouted. So he did, and queen was probably irritated. Now, this wasn't a marriage of love, by the way. She was the despot. She was a ruler, and she believed kings ought to get what they wanted. And she was determined that she was going to get the man that snubbed her husband. She made a plan, and it was a scrupulous plan, and unscrupulous, I would say. And it was just to bring the man to bring false witnesses and cause then they would cause they would say things about, he would say that he committed treason against God and the king, and he was to be put to death. And so they to make sure that the plan worked, his family line was put to death. And when he went to claim the garden, Elijah had found him there and pronounced a terrible judgment on his house and especially on Jezebel. Well, in 2 Kings chapter 9, I believe that's when Jezebel's tyranny had ended. When when Jehu, the army leader, had her cast down. So she had an ugly side. She got what she wanted by manipulation. She was a very strong woman. She got what she wanted through manipulation, and she got it through cunning and deceitfulness. She could have had an opportunity. If she was that religious, she had an opportunity to serve the God of Israel, but chose to serve her own God and use manipulation in order to get the people of Israel to serve her God. And so Baal worship became the law of the land for many years until her death. And the family of Ahab was killed off. Now, let's fast forward even further to the exile of Israel because of sin. And let's fast forward to, the Babylonian Empire had already been conquered. And so we take you now to Persia. The book of Esther talks about the king disposing the queen for not doing his bidding. And so he promised to get a new queen in her stead. So she was banished. And now here's the thing, the law of the Medes and the Persians, not even the king could change the law. Read the book of Esther and the book of Daniel and you'll understand, once they made a law, they had to stick by it and they couldn't change it. So, enter Mordecai and his, he said cousin in the old King James, but he was probably more of an uncle. He raised her, Hadassah, to become, and her Persian name became Esther. And so she had to hide the fact that she was a Jew. Now remember, all these women were getting these beauty treatments, and they were being treated like royalty in order to be presented before the king at the time. Esther was favored more than the other women of that group, and she was more favored than anybody. So she would play an integral part in saving her own people against a plot to have them killed. Read the book of Esther. She would end up having the newly minted prime minister hanged because he had plotted very wickedly to deceive the king into believing that, we don't want these people coming in and taking, and of course now we talk about the Feast of Purim, which is often celebrated in the month of February. All that is a lot of, because they survived an absolute Holocaust that would have probably happened, and in so doing probably preserved the bloodline of many, or even possibly the Messiah himself. You've got to remember that many of them did not come, they were taken into exile into Babylon, and many of them ended up staying when the Persians conquered the Babylonians. But you have one queen who used her power to manipulate and deceive, and another queen who used her power to save and protect her people against an enemy that would want to destroy them. Who would you want to be like, Jezebel or Esther? You decide for yourselves, ladies. You decide what kind of queen you want to be. Do you want to be the manipulative person that will get back at anybody for whatever, even if they didn't do something right? Read the story of Naboth. It is very shocking, and it basically puts into action what type of person Jezebel actually was, and the type of manipulation she used to have the man killed. Read the entire book of Esther and see how a woman of no status earned the right to be queen and use that right to save her people. These are two women, but only one had the power of God behind her. One served her people, one served herself. Which one will it be? I'm Leah. This is the tale of two queens. You decide what kind of queen you want to be. You decide what kind of leader you would like to be. Do you want to be the manipulator or the deliverer? Pray about what kind of relationships you have with your male counterparts. Do you have good relationships or bad relationships? Because that can determine a lot of different things. And many people will follow the former rather than the latter. If you have a good male role model, you'll most likely try to find one. Hopefully try to find one that is right. But if you have a bad male role model, you might want to try to look up, good women of faith and see what they did in their lives to make their situations, because oftentimes we see, the Bible, one thing about the Bible I know, it is good at, it is not one book that will it is not a book that will cover up the faults of its people. Even the saints that are listed in there had their faults. And many people will try to overlook that. Even some very good people have had their faults and they've had to live with them. King David was one of them. King Solomon was another. And they understood what had happened to them. So, Lord willing, we will hopefully, ladies, if you want to discuss this, put a comment in the comments line. I'm sorry I had to go live because sometimes I don't often get to do this very much. So this is my Saturday thing. I do this now on Saturdays. So if I don't get to this right away, be patient, please. I'm not the best at doing these things. So please understand. I'm working on this, and because I'm blind, I don't always do everything just right at the onset. So I'm going to try to be a little more punctual. So Saturday at 4, if I'm not sick or anything like that, I will be here. Okay, fellas, ladies, this one was for you, and you decide what kind of person you want to be. I'm out. God bless, and have a wonderful day. And if I can find that finish button, we'll do really good.
Options button. Double tap to activate.
Boop. Well, eventually I'm going to find it because I got to work my fingers around here. Let's see.
Finish button.
There it is.
Double tap to activate.
It's right at the top. Perfect.
Finish button. Double tap to activate. Are you sure you want to stop streaming? Are you sure you want to stop streaming? Are you sure you want to stop streaming?
Yes, I do want to stop streaming. All right. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it. You have to excuse me for my technical difficulties. Thank you very much.
Are you sure you want to stop streaming? 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 Cancel button. Double tap. Recent key. Cancel button. Double tap to activate. Cancel button. Are you sure you want to stop stream? Cancel button. Double tap to activate.
Okay, this is.
Are you sure you want to stop stream? Are you sure you want to stop streaming? 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 Are you sure you want to stop? Are you sure you want to stop streaming? 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 Are you sure you want to stop? Are you sure you want to stop streaming? Are you sure you want to stop streaming?
Ah, shut up. This thing that wants to talk to me because I have, with the site difficulty, I have problems trying to get it to stop streaming. So here we go.
Are you sure you want to stop streaming? Are you sure you want to stop streaming?
Yes, I do.
Are you sure you want to stop streaming? Are you sure you want to stop streaming? Cancel. Cancel button. Double tap to. Are you sure you want to stop streaming? Cancel button. Double tap to activate.
Okay, I gotta find that OK button. So.
Are you sure you want to stop streaming? Cancel button. Recent key. Cancel button. Are you sure you want to stop streaming? Are you sure you want to stop? Are you sure you want to stop streaming? Are you sure you want to stop streaming? Are you sure you want to stop streaming? Cancel button. Double tap to act. Cancel button. Double tap to. Are you sure you want to stop?